a topic that's really got everybody talking. The no job, no jab, the vaccine passports, the issue of whether proof of vaccination should be a requirement, not only to travel to certain countries, but also for access to the workplace, sporting or cultural events, and now even places of learning. It's a massive global talking point. Reports in the Business Day today indicate that universities are now considering mandatory vaccines for students and staff before they return to in-class learning. Well, let's discuss this now with Buyile Matiwane of the SA Students' Congress, SASCO. Good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time. Do you think asking students and lecturers to get the vaccine if they want to go back to class is a good idea?
I do not think it's a good idea, but I do think, and we as SASCO do support, that everyone should be vaccinated, but we do believe that it should be their choice, and we should address the underlying issues why people would not want to be vaccinated. And I think just making a call to have mandatory vaccination doesn't address some of those underlying issues.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I think from a practical point of view, it's probably an attempt to make sure learning isn't disrupted any further. I mean, we've seen students not only academically impact, but also psychologically. You know, surely if you could say, do you think that you would say it's unfair to bar someone from an actual physical classroom if they haven't had the vaccine?
Yes, it would definitely be unfair to bar someone from the classroom. And we know that interactive learning and classroom learning, there are very practical example benefits to that interactive learning. And to bar someone from having access to that would be extremely unfair. So we think that students in their nature should be reasonable actors. And in them being reasonable, we must appeal to them reasonably for them to vaccinate, not make it mandatory and take away the agency that they have to make the choice. So we must be innovative. We mustn't be lazy thinkers, and university managers mustn't be lazy not to want to engage comprehensively and intellectually about why students should be vaccinating, what are the benefits to it, what are the underlying causes that might obstruct some of them from vaccinating, and address those issues. And we believe logically and naturally, because students should be more intellectual and more rational and reasoning, they will go to vaccinate if we appeal to their consciousness and we appeal to reason.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say that. You would think that, but the recent HSRC survey found only 55% of students under the age of 24 were actually open to being vaccinated. Why do you think that is?
I think it's not just students. I think there's a trust deficit in our country, and this is a general trust deficit that people have with government that needs to be addressed. We can't cower from it. We must confront it. That people might be skeptical for various reasons, but the underlying cause is they might not 100% trust some of these initiatives. And some of them might be founded and unfounded, reasons behind that. But we need to address that trust deficit, and we're not going to do that by making vaccines mandatory. We need to appeal to our people intellectually. We need to be open and transparent, and that's how we're naturally going to get people to go willingly to go and vaccinate. A lot more information must be shared, and I think a lot more targeted campaigns must be done around addressing the issues that our people are facing around trust in government.
Look, I think you're making excellent points, and you're right that process has to be followed. And sometimes putting in a mandatory policy just polarizes people and puts people off, even people who might be open to actually getting the jab. But let's say that process is executed, but there's still people who will not get the vaccination. What is a fair way to ensure that the rights of those who are vaccinated to feel safe in their place of learning is protected, while the rights of those who don't want to get vaccinated is not held against them. I mean, practically, how could it work in a classroom situation, for example?
I think, look, even with vaccination, the general consensus is that the current protocols to keep us safe will still be in place. So I think, look, distancing, social distancing, hygiene practices that have become a normative in COVID-19 times will still be things that we need we don't need to do away with them just because people have been vaccinated. We still need to be very cautious around how we interact, how cleanly we are. So those practices will still be in place. I don't think there's ever been a consensus that everyone will get vaccinated. Even government's messaging was always that we want to get to a herd immunity. That's the word that was used. And that's because we understood that there's a point where the virus and infection rate can be manageable. And that's where we want to go.
Yeah, I hear you. At the same time, it's interesting, this Business Day article is quoting Linda Meyer of University South Africa, agreeing, of course, you can't force anyone to have the jab, but equally, universities have the right to decide who enters their property. I'm wondering if you as SASCA are being drawn into this discussion at this point, and how concerned you might be as to how it's going to progress. Is everyone being pulled into the debate to come up with the right policy at this point?
We as SASCA haven't been formally engaged around some of those sentiments. You know, the first time we saw them was in the media, you know, and we think that it's quite irresponsible of our university managers that are having these discussions not to pull in, you know, one of the major stakeholders in those institutions that we represent, which is the students. So I think the discussion hasn't been an open discussion. It hasn't been a rigorous discussion. And I think to make a blanket statement that universities have the right not to admit anyone to their premises, I think it's to some extent quite an irresponsible statement to make in relation to the context which we are confronted with.
Well, let's hope there is a proper engagement on this matter. Thank you very much for chatting to us this evening. Buyile Matiwane of the SA Students Congress, SASCA. Still